But our next guest has revealed that Trump admitted back in January of 2020 he knew at least some of those documents were classified. It's part of new audio that journalist Bob Woodward is releasing of his interviews with the former president. Woodward says Trump showed him the letters from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un after urging Woodward to, quote, treat them with respect. Trump warned, quote, and don't say I gave them to you, okay? A month later, Woodward pressed Trump in a phone call to let him also see the letters that Trump wrote to Kim. Trump responded, quote, oh, those are so top secret.
Associate editor of the Washington Post, Bob Woodward, joins us now. His new audiobook titled The Trump Tapes. Bob Woodward's 20 interviews with President Donald Trump will go on sale tomorrow.
The piece is entitled The Trump Tapes, 20 interviews that show why he is an unparalleled danger. And Bob writes in part, quote, in more than 50 years of reporting, I have never disclosed the raw interviews or full transcripts of my work. But after listening again to the 20 interviews I conducted with President Donald Trump during his last year as chief executive, I've decided to take the unusual step of releasing them. I was struck by how Trump pounded in my ears in a way the printed page cannot capture. In their totality, these interviews offer an unvarnished portrait of Trump. You hear Trump in his own words, in his own voice during one of the most consequential years in American history. Amid Trump's first impeachment, the coronavirus pandemic, and large racial justice protests, the Trump tapes leaves no doubt that after 4 years in the presidency, Trump has learned where the levers of power are, and full control means installing absolute loyalists in key cabinet and White House posts.
So let's play a clip. This one's from December 5th, 2019, when Bob Woodward asked Donald Trump if he had changed the Republican Party. Take a listen.
Can I ask a political question?
Sure.
And that is, looking at this through the lens of a reporter who wants to look at the whole story, you've changed the Republican Party. You realize that?
95% approval rating. Nobody's ever been at 80. You know, Ronald Reagan was 87.
Okay, is this a movement?
No. That I can't tell you. I can tell you.
What do you think?
It's the party of strength and common sense. Both.
And
you know, I don't say.
Who's the heir?
And I'll tell you what, the heir will have to be determined. That's to be determined. But okay. Like, as an example, the Republican Party has always been known for disloyalty to each other. Okay, they always broke up. I will say this, and this isn't a threat because it's not a threat. But if they went against me, they all lose their election. Even if they lost 5% of my voters, because nobody has a basis like that.
Wow.
So Bob Woodward, I understand we have you up. Talk about the decision to release these audio tapes and why it's so important for Americans to hear Trump in his own voice.
Well, the focus here is I went back, Joe, and listened to these earlier in the year is, does Trump understand the presidency, the duties and responsibilities of the presidency? And discovered in my reporting that he was warned, for example, about the virus January 28th, and he covered it up. And he kept saying, oh, I'm trying to play it down because I don't want to panic people. As all of us have discussed for years, the presidency is a lot about self, but you've got to involve others in the process. Now you see this new crisis with Kim Jong-un. I mean, what shows in the audio, and it so bends the responsibility of a president. He will say, well, even though the CIA says Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, is really dumb, Trump says, oh, he's smart. He's smart. Well, how do you know? Only I know. Well, come on, test your instincts. And he is driven by his instincts.
So in this clip from May 22nd, 2020, Bob asks Donald Trump about the possibility of a contested election. Take a listen.
Well, we're going into the election. Everyone keeps asking, suppose it's a close election and it's contested. What are you going to do? Everyone says Trump is going to stay in the White House if it's contested. Have you?
Well, I don't want to even comment on that.
Sure.
I don't want to comment on that at this time. Hey, Bob, I got all these people. I'll talk to you later on tonight.
Jonathan O'Meara, it was all very calculated, and it's pretty fascinating that of all the things that Donald Trump would admit to Bob Woodward, that was one that he kept quiet, and yet everybody around Donald Trump was saying that he began calculating very early on in 2020 on what he could do to make an excuse for losing the election to Biden, which he feared COVID was going to be responsible for making him lose.
Yeah, I interviewed the former president many times. He's usually not shy. He's not reticent to say anything, even if he thinks it's going to be controversial. So it is striking that he very quickly dodged that question. But we now know, Joe, that this has been in the works for quite some time, that even as early as spring, there were early plans underway to contest the election. Some within the fair grounds of legal challenges. And then, of course, as the year went on, we realized that became far cry from what he actually would end up doing. He planted the seed of doubt about mail-in ballots in particular. That was how he seized on that idea that the deep state was going to rig the results against him. He pushed it day after day, rallies across the country to his supporters. It was amplified by the conservative media. And we saw the nation, his Republicans, many Republicans, whipped into a frenzy after the election because they went along with his false claims of voter fraud, culminating in violence on January 6th. But we're still very much living with it now. And I think these audio recordings are so powerful because it also hits, in other ones, just Trump, the power of repetition. That's how Trump always works. He just talks over you. He tries to bully you. He tries to badger you. He keeps trying to make his point, whether to a reporter or to a rally crowd, eventually believing he can convince you of his truth, even if it's a complete lie.
Yeah, in this clip from December 13th, 2019, President Trump questions why the U.S. continues to protect South Korea. Take a listen.
I always ask the one question, why are we defending South Korea? See, I have that, Why are we doing this? And I said to South Korea, I told you about the $500 million, right?
Yes.
They're paying $500 million more. It took me one day.
Yeah.
I said, we're defending you. And we're losing a fortune, and you're paying the same thing for 30 years, which is nothing. You're paying almost nothing. You got to pay. And they've agreed to $500 million. Now I'm asking for much billions more. But I say, it's a rich country. I say, so we're defending you. We're allowing you to exist. Why are we doing that? Why do we care? We're 8,500 miles away. Why do we care? Why do we have our 32,000 soldiers over there willing to fight for you? And you're not paying us. Why?
At least, Jordan, the stupidity. I don't know if it's stupidity, actually. It's more malevolent because obviously he loves dictators. He's talks about his love letters with Kim Jong-un, one of the most brutal dictators on the planet, who's been threatening our allies with nuclear war for quite some time. It's so condescending. Why do we care? Like, you wouldn't exist without us, on and on. It's just like how we talked about NATO. This is, again, it's so abhorrent. I sit back and I wonder, who are these people who claim to used to be supporters of Ronald Reagan and sort of the Margaret Thatcher wing of conservative politics, who now actually have fully embraced Trump's American first nonsense, his sort of Charles Lindbergh nonsense, and loves dictators, loves Putin, praises his invasion of Ukraine, praises Kim Jong-un. I mean, I'm not going to ask, who is this guy? We know who this guy is. Who are these so-called conservatives that we used to know who've completely sold out to a guy who prefers authoritarian leaders to democratically elected leaders?
Well, Joe, they don't believe it. And you and I both know that most of them don't believe what they parrot when it comes to parroting anything that Donald Trump says on foreign policy, because that, just whatever was coming out of his mouth. I remember different presidents and scholars debate, what's their grand policy? It's just not that robust. And, grand strategy with Trump is more like getting from point A to point B and him tying his shoelaces. But these tapes, I'm so excited to hear the full interviews, just because listening to Woodward, too, is such a master class in how to interview. And Trump certainly just felt so empowered to share his moronic worldview and just childish. I don't even want to say childish, because it's not, that's an insult to children, but just naivete when it comes to our American geopolitical posture in Asia.
So Bob's new audiobook is on sale tomorrow. And again, he has 20 interviews that he thought were much better heard than, they jump off the page differently. He just thought hearing Trump's voice saying these things was worth the American people hearing and really taking note of.